very much, and thank you for having me today. I wish I were live from the Sundance Film Festival, but life happens, and the festival is now remote this year for the second year in a row. It's usually held in Park City, Utah, during this time, but unfortunately, as I said, it's being held in everybody's homes and offices. So unfortunately, we don't have the snow that they have in Park City right now here in DC. We just have the cold weather. Just to let you know, I'm better at having a discussion than I am having just talking. So if you have any questions or want to know anything in particular, just let me know, and I can take the time, to stop talking about what I am talking about and answer any questions that you might have. We'll also have questions at the end of the talk. So just to give you a little background on the Sundance Film Festival, it's the largest independent film festival in the world. About 50,000 people attended the festival in 2020, which was the last year that they had it live. So it's quite an experience. It started out as a way to have independent filmmakers and those outside of the Hollywood system have their work seen by industry executives and a wider audience. Since around the 2000s, it sort of morphed into an industry event. Now we have the larger films that are premiering for the year, and with the studios involved, and higher budgets and more well-known actors. But there still remains some parts of it that are just for the smaller filmmakers, and I tend to specialize in those. I specialize in independent documentaries. So it's kind of a nice mix of both the kind of Hollywood types, but also just the normal everyday people who just tend to enjoy filmmaking. And so you do have that nice mix there. So what does a film scout do at a festival? Generally, our work starts long before the film festival starts. People start preparing for the next festival really once the current festival has ended. And so the people at Sundance will start planning for the next film festival in February. The next festival will hopefully be live in Park City in January of 2023. So they start looking at how they want the festival to look. They start reading the trades to see what's coming out. I also read the trades to see what's coming out, see what our trends are going to be, see what the studios are thinking, and that will kind of influence kind of the direction that we're going. So throughout the year, we'll keep track of those trends, and then actually start putting feelers out to kind of see who's going to be doing what, and really what kind of subjects we'll be interested. And then usually around November, we start really planning the strategy for the actual film festival. We'll start getting our lodging taken care of, the hotels taken care of, and then the new schedule for Sundance will come out usually in December. So that's really when the work starts, is planning what movies are coming up and kind of how we want to address those. Once we get to the film festival, that's when we start having parties and actually meeting with the filmmakers and really starting to have meetings with the filmmakers and looking at the films and deciding which ones we want to go after. The day in the life of a film scout is somewhat boring, I would say. A lot of people think it's exciting just going to films and going to parties, but for us, it's a working event. We'll see a film and really look at the filmmakers, look at what they've done in the past, if they've done anything, look at the subject matter, look at what the market will bear, where we can actually put the film. For a film scout working for a venture capital firm or any business outside of the studios, a film becomes an asset. It's bought like any other property, like a house, a business, anything else. It's an asset that can be used to secure loans, that can be secured to show proof of financing. It just for us, it just becomes another asset, like money, again, or property. It usually goes into our library and is not generally released by us. The venture capital firm does not do any direct distribution of films. We license out films to different entities like Netflix, the Sundance Channel, Hulu, any of those. So you won't see it under our name, but you'll see it hopefully in your suggestions when you look up Netflix or turn on Hulu. The asset, we get money from the film simply by leasing it out or selling it directly to another entity. The films can stay in our vault for a number of years. So we may buy something at Sundance this year. For instance, we're looking at a film called Fire of Love. That is a documentary about two scientists who studied volcanoes exclusively and unfortunately perished in a volcano. This is something that we're interested in because it is a true life story. And it shows the interest, two people pursuing their passion and interests. This film, we will hopefully get the rights to. We'll buy it, again, like any other property, and keep it in our vault, hopefully license it out, and make money that way. If we're not able to license it out, then it just becomes an asset that can be used to secure loans, that can be used to really provide any financial stability that we need. This is not the ideal situation for a lot of filmmakers because they want to go to Sundance for distribution and to have a studio, for instance, Sony or HBO, actually buy their film and show it. This is a way for them, and Sundance is the way for them to get this acknowledgement and recognition. They also enjoy going to Sundance because it's what we call an Oscar qualifier. There are several ways that a film can qualify for an Oscar. Usually it has to be shown before a certain number of people. It has to be released into a theater in either Los Angeles or New York, or it can be shown at a film festival. And if it wins at the film festival, then it can then be considered for an Oscar. This doesn't mean that it makes the final 5 that you see in the Oscar telecast, but it's a way for them to at least get into the running for that and be considered by the Academy members for inclusion in the final voting. So filmmakers really want that recognition, but they will deal with a number of other venture capital firms or other investment groups if there's no interest among the studios. So we're competing. So the venture capital firms and independent producers are working with. Will work together to get the best deal for the filmmakers, and also the best deals for their particular entity. A lot of the films that you see in the theaters that came from Sundance will have some tie-ins. And what we mean by tie-ins is films that are packaged together. For instance, you may have a large tentpole or big event film that is tied with a number of smaller films. This is another way to get films seen by a larger audience. Usually what that will entail is the big event film will be released on a major outlet, such as a theater or on a streaming service. And then the smaller films will be released on the streaming service and may be released with the DVD of the larger film. Sometimes these are conditions of the sale of the larger film, and sometimes they're what the distributor would like, because they get another opportunity to make more money off of the larger film by having the smaller films all tied together. There are several film festivals that are throughout the year. Sundance is the largest and is usually the first one people attend because it comes at the beginning of the year. A lot of the films that are being considered for Oscars that are considered the money makers have already been released throughout the year. They have to be released by December 31st in order to be considered for an Oscar. And this is a chance for the studios to show the films that they've been working on. It's a chance for the smaller the smaller filmmakers to get their work seen. And it's generally a good time. It's wonderful being in Park City. It's a great opportunity to talk with other filmmakers and to see what they're up to. And I do apologize. I've been having a little problem with my internet today. So if I go in and out, I do apologize for that. And I do apologize. It looks like we are having a bit of an interruption. There we go, we're back. I apologize for that. Unfortunately, I have to deal with the domestic internet instead of office internet right now. So I do apologize for that. But I like to think of the film festivals as a combination of going out to see the movies, and an combination of going out to see the movies, an auction, and a industry event, all at the same time. It's a trade show. It's people are showing their wares, they're showing their accomplishments, they're showing a product that they want other people to buy. And it's an industry event. It's a way to meet other people, to network, to kind of find out what's been going on and what is going to be coming on in the next year. It's also a way to just see movies. There are times when the schedule allows, when we will see movies that have nothing to do with what we're looking to buy. It's just an opportunity to sit back and enjoy the films. I currently, as my father said, my main focus is documentaries. So I am currently just working on United States and world documentaries, trying to decide what we think is going to be a profitable asset and what is going to be something that can be widely seen, hopefully, eventually something that we can sell to the streaming services, and people will enjoy and hopefully see at the next Academy Awards. Throughout the year, even when we're not going to film festivals, we're constantly looking for new films. We're looking to see if anything's coming up. Luckily here in DC, there is a great documentary world. A lot of people don't realize that DC has a film community. It's a smaller film community, certainly, and is focused on documentaries. But we also have the American Film Institute, and so we have the AFI Docs Festival, which is another great opportunity to see films and to see what's going out there and to meet with people. But one thing that I personally enjoy about these film festivals and going to see documentaries is just to see normal, everyday people who love films and have and feel they have something to say. To that end, I tend to go to the smaller groups that are not official film festivals, that are not really there for people to sell their product. I go there to meet with people and to see what their ideas are. And with that, you can see different ideas that people have about their lives, about a particular subject that interests them, something that they're passionate about. And they may not consider themselves professional filmmakers, but you never know. You never know where you're going to find the diamond in the rough. And that's always interesting. That's always interesting to see. So you don't have to go to the film festivals to find the next great thing, to find something that's actually going to be either seen in the theaters or is considered an Oscar contender. It may be something that you just discover just flipping through HBO or flipping through Netflix, or going to some of the sidewalk talks that they have in Birmingham, or just some of the group meetings for anyone who enjoys documentaries. But for the film festivals, while this is considered a good opportunity to really get to get some awards, to be seen, to get some media, to get some press. There are several film festivals throughout the year. We call this our festival season, which generally runs from January into October, depending on when the film festivals are being shown, and whether they're live or not. We have coming up some of this after Sundance. We'll have another one called South by Southwest, which is in Austin, Texas. It's considered another Oscar qualifier and another industry event. South by Southwest will show some of the films that are currently being shown at Sundance, and they do this again to get more recognition, to get more press before the films are actually released into the theaters. I do have a question from Emily. Let's see, what have you learned about how to anticipate which films attract viewers? Have you ever been disappointed in a documentary you thought was important and interesting, but didn't attract the audience you hoped for? If so, what was the subject? Well, first, what have I learned about how to anticipate which films will attract viewers? It's a very subjective way of looking at it. I've learned not to read the journals, to read the trades, to kind of see what people anticipate will be the trends, but to really go with my gut, because I found that really, if it's something that I like, I think there will be an audience for it. There are so many different documentaries, and there are so many different subject matters that you can't anticipate everyone or everyone's interests. So you just kind of look at the trades, kind of look at the news to see what trends might be of interest, and just kind of look for that. As far as films that I've been disappointed in, there's not really a subject matter that's as a whole that has that I've been disappointed in, but the individual films. You are dealing with people, and people who have put their passion into a particular story and a particular point of view. There was a film that I saw at Sidewalk several years ago that was about a dog and overcoming some obstacles. And it was something that I really fell in love with, and thought that there would be a huge audience for, because people love dogs. People who really love dogs consider themselves, dog parents. They're babies, fur babies. And I thought that there would be a huge market for it. Unfortunately, what happened, because we are dealing with people, we could never get it off the ground. We had issues with the filmmaker not wanting to make changes that we thought would be right, and really working with us. So unfortunately, after about a year of working with him, we had to abandon the project. When we abandon a project, it is usually just put into a separate pile of films, of projects, not put in our vault. Sometimes it's returned to the filmmaker. The rights are returned to him to do with what he wants, and and it's a business loss. So that was a little disappointing. And so you have moments like that where we buy a film, we put a lot of work into it, either by making it into a finished product that can be released, or simply by buying the film, taking the time to buy the film and to mount the marketing and proposing the marketing strategy that we think will be best for the film. So that's really where the disappointment occurs.
Noel?
Yes.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I'm curious as to how the transaction takes place. Do you offer a sum of money or an option? And if you have competition, is there a kind of auction that goes on between the different scouts who may all want that same film that you like so much? And if you'd give us an idea, what would be the cost that would come up, or a range of finances that would be necessary to buy a particular documentary that was popular?
Well, for a documentary, it's going to be a lot less than for a feature film. But usually in the documentaries, we will start at a couple of $100,000. So let's say for a popular film that's ready to go, a popular documentary that's ready to go, we would usually start at about 500,000.
Wow.
So considering most feature films will start at, let's say, 5 to 10 million, it's not really the most profitable genre. But for a popular documentary that's ready to go with an established documentary filmmaker who has a good background, we usually start at around 500,000. And usually sort of the process that it is we'll sit down with the documentary filmmaker and make our initial offer. When we make our initial offer, we also look at the budget that it took to make the film, and any outstanding debts that the filmmaker might have. So any outstanding debts like licensing fees, crew expenses, crew salaries, anything like that. So we'll usually start at 500,000, and we'll sit down with the documentary filmmaker and say that, and give him, our spiel and say what we want to do with the film, kind of where we see the market being, and what we think we can sell it for, and what his profit would be from that. Then he may have other meetings with other film scouts or studios, and then he'll come back to us, hopefully, and say, well, let's say Sony is offering me 750,000. So we get into sort of a bidding war and see if we can make that. Once a price has been agreed upon, let's say he accepts our offer of 800,000. Then we unfortunately have to get lawyers involved. And so that's always the fun part. And basically what we do is we draw up a bill of sale, and which explains, everything that we're planning to do with this film, what rights we retain. We can retain any rights. We have just rights of distribution. We have rights of content, and we have replay rights. And basically the replay rights it can be shown in different mediums. Everything within the contract stipulates in very specific detail where we can show it and how long we can show it. So you have to really anticipate any new media. In the past, I graduated in 95, so I'm old. And at that time, distribution contracts was only stated Blu-ray, cable, and broadcast and theatrical rights. Now you have so much, now the contracts have to stipulate really any new media that may come up during the term of the contract, because there's just constantly new media coming up. People are showing snippets on YouTube. They're showing snippets on different computers, different file sharing applications. They're showing it on streaming. There are just so many different ways. So within that contract, you have to stipulate where exactly it can be shown. So once all of the legal work for that part is done, for us, typically for the venture capital firm, the film will then go into the vault and is listed on our catalog for possible films. The ideal way, the ideal next step is that we sell it to a streaming service and they show it on their platform and either pay us a licensing fee, which is what Netflix or Hulu would do, or buy it outright, which then we hand over all of our rights to that particular film. So it can be a long process depending on how difficult everybody wants to be.
Does the filmmaker typically in your contract get a percentage, of future showing or anything like that, or is all they get? You said something about and how much profit he'll make. Mm-hmm. So I assume that there's some mechanism for that.
There is, and it can go either way. We'll usually, sometimes the filmmaker just wants to sell it outright, does not want to deal with it anymore. At that time, we'll offer, let's say, again, the $800,000 that we bought it for. If they decide they do want a percentage of it, a percentage of future showings or future sales, then we'll offer them less. So we may say, okay, we'll give you $650,000 plus, let's say, 2% of the sales that we make, or the licensing fees, or the future showings of it. So it really depends on what the filmmaker wants, but we're prepared usually to offer either or.
What's the largest percentage that you might offer?
Generally, the largest percentage is 5%. Okay. So it's not a huge amount, or it may not seem like a huge amount, but it can be very large depending on what the future holds. It's a gamble, either way. And there are some filmmakers who don't want to take that gamble, who have worked on a project. Maybe they have, they're in that financial situation where they need to just sell it and forget about it. And then there are others who really believe in their product and want to be part of it for the lifetime of the film. But usually 5% is our limit.
Thanks.
Is this the same for plays that are episodic? We've been watching this plays on Netflix called Stichel, and it's wildly popular. And I'm wondering if the same mechanism applies to these plays that come on episodes, and is it a continuation of the original deal?
Yes, it is a continuation of the original deal. Usually for episodic shows, plays, it's usually for a specific duration. In California, we operate on 7-year contracts. Contracts have to be renegotiated every 7 years under California law. So, for instance, if you have a series that premieres at Sundance, and we decide to offer, for a series, we might offer, let's say, $1 million. So that's our original contract, where we say it's $1 million for this first season of X number, let's say 14 episodes. So for every year that that show is on, we're operating on, we'll pay, let's say we'll pay $100 million, we'll pay $1 million each year for 14 episodes. So that's considered the original contract. And that will be in effect for 7 years, up to 7 years. So let's say we're going to pay $7 million over the course of the series. Once that 7 years is up, then you can renegotiate. Many times you'll hear of different cast members or crew renegotiating contracts after a series has been considered a success, is picked up for another year. Those can be renegotiated, but usually you're operating under the original 7-year contract. So from Nancy, are there 3 films that you would highly recommend? Aside from working in documentaries, I am a huge lover of classic films. So certainly Casablanca is on my list every time anybody asks me to recommend films, but a lot of people have seen that. One of the films that premiered at Sundance last year is called Coda. It's now being shown on different streaming services. I believe it's on Apple Plus, and has been released in the theater. So that is one that I would highly recommend. Another film more on the documentary side that I would recommend is called Sins of My Father. It was shown on HBO. And it's about Pablo Escobar's son returning to Colombia. And it's a very interesting documentary about a son having to realize, kind of reconcile the father he loved with someone who killed a lot of people and was a very bad person. So it's a very interesting documentary about forgiveness and the relationship between fathers and sons. So I would recommend that. That's Sins of My Father. It is in Spanish, but it does have English subtitles. So unfortunately, you have to pay attention, really pay attention.
Thank you.
When you sell a series, do you tend to sell it outright, or does, like if you sell it to Netflix and they show it multiple years, do they pay you each year for the rights to do it, or is that all in the initial negotiation?
Typically, we will sell it, we will license the film, license the series. So they are continually paying. They'll show it for a specific number of times. A lot of times with streaming services, you'll see that they may have a film and show it for 3 months straight, and then you don't see it, then you don't see it at all. And that's because they've licensed the film or TV series, so they can only show it for a certain number of months or years. They do have to pay the owners, either the production company or the studio, to license it for that time, and then they can renegotiate their contract and show it, however long they want. But they do have to pay a licensing fee each time they renew that.
Well, I wondered how it works, because sometimes it's so many series, so many years are on Netflix, and then after that it's somewhere else to watch other episodes, etc.
Yeah, a lot of
So
the
they were
time,
selling rights or whatever.
yeah, in that sense, they have not, in that situation, they have not bought the property outright, but they're just leasing it, they're licensing it from us. Sometimes you'll see a show that's on multiple channels. It might be, let's say, on HBO, and it might be on TNT. They've separately licensed
Right.
the film to be shown on both. The streaming services don't typically buy, in some cases they will buy directly from us, but they tend to either buy directly from the filmmaker or license, because it's just easier. It's less of an amount for them to pay out to a venture capital firm. They can pay the actual filmmaker less, or they can license it for a less cost. One thing I think that surprises people is the show business is a business. And so you have people constantly doing cost and benefit analysis of each project and looking at the benefit and seeing whether it's better to buy outright or to lease.
Noel, you obviously got this job for a number of years and obviously have a talent for it. How do you keep up your ability, or are you judged on how well your films do for the renewal of your particular contract?
For my contract, we do have performance reviews constantly. So we're looking at how much our film, any film that we have, comes in, whether we stay under budget. We do have a budget for each film. We have a budget for the overall year, and so we have to make sure that we stay under budget. We are judged on whether our filmmakers are staying under budget. They have their budgets for films. We have to make sure that they stay under that and aren't going over. So it is a performance review based. How much money we can save, how much income we produce for the venture capital firm, whether our films are making any money on the licensing side or are accruing money as they stay in the vault.
Noel, what films are in the running this year for an Oscar for Best Documentary?
Right now, because the year just started and the film festival has just started, and Sundance just started yesterday. Right now, we do not have any films that have kind of emerged as the winners, or as the winners of the best project, and therefore the Oscars. If the film, let's say one of the films we're looking at, Fire of Love, wins Best Documentary at the Sundance Film Festival, then it will be in contention for the Oscars, which will start being voted on usually around this time, January. They'll start kind of whittling those down in January of 2023.
Yeah, I was really speaking of films that premiered in 2021 and would be considered for this year's Oscar. We watched Summer of Soul last night, which I thought was a very good documentary, and I was curious if it would be under consideration for an Oscar.
Summer of Soul was listed on the initial ballot. So hopefully it will be considered for an Oscar. There are several documentaries that were on the initial ballot, and I'm not sure which ones have actually made it to the final 5, which will be announced in a couple of days. So we're really looking forward to seeing if there's any well-known ones or any ones that I had called. Unfortunately, I'm not a member of the Academy. I wish I were, because the Academy has very few documentary filmmakers as far as its membership. So a lot of actors and fiction producers, narrative producers, vote on the Oscars for documentary. I think they need to add more documentary filmmakers because some get overlooked when we're.
I would certainly agree with that. What would you have to do to qualify to be a member of the Academy?
You have to be asked, and usually what it's based on is the lifetime of work, and also it's if you have won an Oscar yourself, then you gain membership. But it's also looking at the body of work over a number of years, because a lot of the films that I work on are used as the asset instead of actually being released. It's more difficult, but you kind of generally it's looking at how well your films have done and how long you've been in the industry.
One last question. Will we ever see big crowds of people thronging to movie theaters again?
I don't think we'll see the big crowds that we had before. There will always be films that people want to see on the big screen. Certainly epic films, superhero films, beautiful cinematography films. People want to see those on the big screen. But I think because most films now are released both in theaters and on streaming services, most people are looking at the streaming services. They don't want to go out into the big crowds as they did before. So I don't think we'll see as big crowds. I think there will always be a market for theaters. It may be that the smaller theaters get more business, which I think would be a great thing. I'm a fan of the small theaters.
Good, thanks.
I have a question. I'd like to know how does a filmmaker get a scout's attention, especially a filmmaker who works on a shoestring budget and doesn't have showy types of films?
It is difficult. Sometimes I refer to it as finding your soulmate, because it can be difficult to find your soulmate. It can be difficult to find the right scout and the right filmmaker and put them together. It can be very difficult, but usually if there's a compelling story, that will get a scout's attention. Good word of mouth will get a scout's attention. But unfortunately, a lot of films do fall through the cracks because we just don't hear about them, or they don't have any what we call buzz about them. But we do try to, or at least I try to look at some of the smaller films that people are talking about, but they're not overly enthusiastic about. And luckily with documentaries, there's a smaller pool at Sundance or other film festivals. And that way we can see some of the smaller filmmakers and hopefully find that. Typically people get my attention by just having a compelling subject matter or something that I'm interested in. And just having a compelling story and something that I want to see, maybe that I haven't seen from another filmmaker.
Do you ever suggest that they do parts of a film over to make it better with your suggestions or a film critic's suggestions?
Oh, frequently. Most of the bigger films will be redone several times because they're shown in front of critics, they're shown in front of ordinary people, focus groups. So they're redone several times. For the smaller films where they don't have the budget to do the focus groups and show them in front of critics, we are their focus group. The film scouts are their focus group. They're audition they're showing is at film festivals. And frequently we will ask them to redo things, not so much like big things like the ending, because they are documentaries, they're based on real life. But we will ask them to maybe focus on a different subject. Maybe they're looking at 3 separate stories and who have a common theme. And we'll suggest, well, maybe these 2 stories are more interesting than the third. So focus on the second story. So they'll recut it. They'll have the footage from that and sort of change the narrative there. But usually it's just smaller things like syncing their sound and their video, and some of the redoing some of the exteriors or some of the scenery if they can. But no film that I've seen is perfect going right out of the gate. So they have to be willing to make the changes. And some are, and some aren't. It's like, any other artist. Sometimes they're willing to compromise and sometimes they aren't. But we will make this suggestion for pretty much every film, even if it's just a smaller suggestion or a smaller part of it. And Kathy Ronstead has asked, have you attended our Sidewalk Cinema Festival? I have attended both. I've been to the Sidewalk Cinema, which is a great little theater. I highly encourage anybody to go there and support the small theaters. It's a nice, intimate location. And I have attended the Sidewalk Film Festival. It's been a number of years, but I've actually found films there that I've wanted to bring back to the venture capital group and hopefully work on and show. Some of them have worked out and some of them haven't, but it's always fun to see what is out there. So I think if you can attend a festival, whether it's a big one or a small one like Sidewalk, definitely go, kind of see what you like, and see if there's something that really speaks to you, and to really talk about it and let other people know about it, because there's so much out there that people may not know about. But if your friends like it, somebody else is going to, if you and your friends like it, somebody else is going to like it. And that's really what I'm looking for. When I go to
think Joanna has a question for you.
Okay. Hi, Joanna.
Thank you for the privilege to receive. We have the privilege of sitting with you over many a dinner table. But would you talk to your audience about the minutia of making a film, particularly regarding animals? We do not see any other film that we immediately think of you as, my Lord, what is she going to do with that one?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
We have so enjoyed hearing you talk about the minutia of making films. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Would you take a moment to tell your audience how you handle animals on the set? Every time we've seen an animal, I always think, what is Noel going to do with that rhinoceros?
One of the jobs, there are many jobs that people can have in the film industry. And one of them is animal handler. And so you have people who are trained to deal with different types of animals. Usually it's a dog, and you'll have dog handlers, people who have trained their dogs to do whatever needs to be done. But you also have big animal handlers. So usually they are vets or have veterinarian training. They have animal training. They've worked with animals for a number of years. And they really handle everything. The director will say, I want the rhinoceros to bow down at this particular moment. And so you have the trainer offset who will actually bow down, get them to bow down in front of the camera. So it's literally a cast of thousands behind the scenes. You have people handling every single part of it. So luckily, I don't have to handle the rhinoceros myself. Any other questions?
What sort of profit do you consider a winner on one of your films that you buy? And secondly, how do you take your pikers, the ones that just don't go anywhere and don't really have any commercial value for viewing, and consider them an asset that you can use in some other way?
Well, we generally say a film is successful if it makes 3 times its budget, because you're looking at the cost of making the film, you're looking at the marketing costs, you're looking at other expenses. So if it makes 3 times its budget, let's say, again, the budget for documentary short will probably be around $10,000. So if it makes $30,000, we consider it a commercial success and a profitable film. The wonderful thing about films is you can use any part of it. If the film itself is not commercially viable, if we have no market for it, then it can be cut up. And so we can use the scenery, we can use interviews, and those different parts can be sold for different uses. For instance, stock footage, for a news station, interviews for other venues. So really, once we have it, it can be used in so many different ways. We don't have to use it intact. So if there's not the market that we thought there was, then we can sell off the little parts of it.
But
so there are ways to make money.
You said your opening price on most of the things you buy are $500,000.
Mm-hmm.
So are you saying you need to have a return of 1.5 million?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay.
And that doesn't have to, there's no real time limit on that. So it's not like, within a year we need to make that money. But within the lifetime of the film, we need to make at least that much for it to be a profitable film. So it can be sold worldwide. There have been films that have sat in like a studio's vault for 5-10 years and then been released and been successful. So it's just, you kind of look and see when the right market is going to be. For instance, we might think that animal films are going to be very successful this year, and for whatever reason, there's a couple of animal films that aren't successful. So we decide to put the film away and not market it at all. And then, in 5 years, maybe animal films are making a comeback. So we will then release it at that point and may make the profit that we're looking for.
What's your most successful one?
Probably the most successful in terms of, it was one that we ended up selling off parts to be used in other films. Was and one of the first ones I did, which was about a dog called The King Is Here, and we ended up selling off parts of the film and making our money that way. It was about dogs. We were able to sell the footage as stock footage. So in that instance, we were successful. I was in that, and that's how we got our money. for that one.
Noel, how do you
You
protect
bought-
yourself against pirating?
It's very difficult because it's very easy to do with the internet. We have lawyers on call who are looking, if we suspect that there's pirating, then we will go to them. Usually every copy of a film is encrypted with a source code that we can track. So if it shows up, we can kind of trace it back to that person. One of the biggest sources of pirating we found, of original films to be pirated, has been from the Academy, because previously Academy members would get screeners in the mail, would get the copy of the film in the mail, and they would just watch it at home. And then they would throw it away once they had seen it. And so the industry found that a number of people were going through the trash and finding the films that way, and then copying them and selling them on the black market. So the industry as a whole has put source codes on each of the screeners and other copies of the film, so that they can be traced back to the original owner. But it's a constant battle. It's a constant battle, not only for the full film itself, but characters within it, with storyline, with different ways. So it's a long process, but every time something new comes up, we try to deal with it the best way we can.
You said that some films are put on the shelf for many years. What's the fear of them being outdated and not being used because they're outdated?
It is a constant concern, because the industry moves fast and people's tastes move very fast. Something that might be desirable in January could be considered outdated in February. So it's a chance you have to take. It's like really any other investment. You just have to have confidence in what you're doing, and it's a gamble. You may be outdated next week, but you just have to try to keep up and have confidence that it will eventually come back around. But it is definitely a concern, and that's something that we look at when we're buying a film, to see if we feel that the trend is going to stay, or if it's going to be very quick.
How do you remember all the things that are on the shelf, so to speak? And you have a librarian or a cataloger or somebody?
We do have people who are employed in records management, so they keep we have constant data updates to our database that will list every film that's in there, along with the filmmaker, the year it was made, and a brief synopsis, so we can look it up. So if, let's say, my boss says, I want to see I want to see 5 films that we have on domestic violence, then I can call those up and present him with those, and he decides which one he wants. But there are people that's their job, is just to keep everything organized, and to keep a list of everything that we have out there. And we do have some films that have been on the shelf for 20 years that may be called up because we can use part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Or somebody can use part of it. And you'll have things like some people will call and say that they're looking for, let's say, a shot of soldiers around an AT&T sign. We have all of that information. And so we can call it up at a moment's notice. But there are people who do that exclusively.
Is it possible you may have a filmmaker who becomes famous 10 years later, and then you want to do a biographical look back at what he's done? Then you could go into the archives if they're called archives, and find them.
Yes, we can do that. We can call it up by the filmmaker. And you will have cases like that where somebody who has done something small, let's say 15 years ago, suddenly has a successful film that speaks to the world, and you want to re-release that film, the film that they did 15 years ago. You can do that depending on the agreement that you had, the original agreement you had with the filmmaker. You can release that with or without his permission. So sometimes you will have that. There was a film called Don's Plum that came out that was considered the worst film that Leonardo DiCaprio ever made, and he never wanted to see it released. He did it and wanted to forget about it. And it was released without his permission, simply because the original agreement was that the filmmakers had all the rights to it. So they were able to release it. Luckily, nobody saw it, but it was out there in the world. So you'll have that very frequently, where people will become successful, and some of their older work that they did for money, in no love, will be released. That can also be done with pictures, that they maybe did a photo shoot that they weren't proud of for a magazine, and then they become successful, and the photographer can re-release those. So you have to be careful of everything that you do. It is out there in the world.
Noel, what's the next big project for PBS? They've had some big ones here recently. Are you aware of one coming out this year?
Not that I know of this year, but they have a number of good programs. I think they might be doing another one with Ken Burns soon, which has been very successful, but I have not heard any specifics yet. But that will kind of be decided on a quarter by quarter basis, depending on kind of what they need and what they think will be successful. But we do have several PBS scouts actually who are at Sundance, and kind of seeing what's out there as well. So we try not to compete with them.
What's the typical lead time? I can remember going in the previews, they said coming out next year, and it was like 15 months away. Mm-hmm. But what's the typical time once a movie's completed before it goes into theaters?
Usually it's about a year, because once the actual filming has been completed, there are many other steps that need to be taken. And one of them is the one that takes the most time is the editing, because usually when somebody says, let's say in the year, you're in the theaters in December of 2021 and it says coming next Christmas, and you see a preview that says coming next Christmas, they've put together a trailer edit. So what they've done is they've taken the footage, the director has told the editor, this is what we want to focus on. And the editor will take that information and put together a small trailer, a teaser. And that will be released to the theaters, but they haven't actually done all of the editing at that time. So it takes about a year to go through all the footage, to edit all the footage into a 2-hour film, show it to the focus groups, show it to the critics, and show it to other industry insiders. And then they may re-edit that film depending on what people have said about it. So the trailer that you see in the theaters may be totally different from the actual film that comes out. And then once the editing is done and once they've decided on the finished product, then they have to market it. So the marketing strategy can take a number of months as well. So usually it's about a year or so between the end of filming and the release of the film.
Do you think that PBS does a good turnaround time? I'm thinking right now, the assault on the Capitol, January 6th, and well, CNN or other organizations also have their documentaries, and they make it very timely within a year sometimes.
I think they do. And some of the news stations like PBS, CNN have a tighter turnaround because they're constantly looking at footage and they're constantly editing. So that every day they have a list of, you know, kind of what they've shot that particular day and where they want the story to go. And so it's for them, they have tight turnaround time, a couple of months. And they also have more of their deadline set in stone. For instance, they want to show for like January 6th, they want to show something on the anniversary of January 6th. So that's kind of their deadline that they have in mind. And they start looking at that probably about 6 months beforehand. So they want to stay, you know, within a couple of months, but it's a tighter deadline, and I think they do a good job of meeting those deadlines and making it timely. It just sort of depends on what they want to do and when they want to show it, and they start having those discussions fairly early on.
When you go to a film festival, how many films in a day can you effectively watch?
For me, it's about 3 films. Some people can do more. I know that there are some scouts who will just go in, see 5 minutes and leave because they know what they're looking for. They have that intuitiveness, and some are successful and some aren't. For me, it's about 3 because I really want to see the entire film and want to hear the audience's reactions to those films and really see the credits, see who was involved and in it. Sometimes I'll see somebody that I know, and then I can ask them kind of what the film was like, what it was like shooting, you know, where they were, get some more information. For me, that just helps. But I would say about 3 films a day, and then I have to watch something stupid on television to get everything that I've just seen, because sometimes the subject matter can be a little dark. So I put on a cartoon. But usually I would say on a typical day, there are about 6 films that are scheduled. And so within that, I'll say about half.
How many do you generally see the entire festival?
How many days do I stay?
How many films do you see? You think of 3 a day, about how many total do you see at the festival?
I usually see about 35 a day because the film festivals are about 2 weeks long.
Okay.
I don't see a film every day. There are meetings, there are other events that I go to, but generally about 35 films that I've seen a day. And then from those 35, I have to sort of cull it down to about half. And then once I kind of cull those down, I write up a report on each one of the ones that I would suggest that we go after, and then we start the negotiations. So the process itself can take about a month or 2 actually to get everything started to the point where we're ready to write a contract with them.
So you obviously have to take fairly good notes on each film.
You do.
At the time, yeah.
Yeah, at the time. And I've kind of learned that. It was actually something that was taught to me when I was in college, where we would see films every week and we'd have to write about those films. And it wasn't just I liked the film, or
Right.
you had to make really detailed notes about each film. So I kind of learned that, and it's helped a lot in film festivals because I'm writing in the dark a lot of the time,
Right.
making notes, and then going back and either seeing the film again or looking at a trailer or looking at some other notes about it. So you do have to make detailed notes, but I'm the first time I'm kind of looking for the audience, I'm listening for the audience reaction and writing the notes at the same time. So I like to see it once it's been finished. So, and I can say, oh, I missed that.
Do you, when you go back to your office, so to speak, do you, are you able to get copies of the films to show to other people in your organization?
We are able to get a trailer, so usually a 5-minute trailer about what that showcases the film.
Okay.
They don't see the entire film until it's finished, but they'll just see the trailer.
You've got a chat there from Desi. You want to read that one?
Certainly. So Jesse says, a friend of mine was a puppeteer on Muppets Take Manhattan. His name is in the credits, though his scene wound up on being cut. He still gets a check. The reason he still gets a check is because his name is in the credits. And this can be a very, this can be a bone of contention within the guilds. There are many guilds that protect different workers, and in their initial contract, it will say that they get either certain residuals, so they'll get paid every time the film is shown, or they'll get a straight salary, depending on what their contract says. And it doesn't matter whether the film part is edited out or not, they will still get, if they still get a credit at the end, then they will still, it's still considered they worked on it, and they'll either get their salary or they'll get a percentage. So it doesn't matter if it goes onto the room floor or not.
When you
Go ahead, Andy.
when you listen to film critics talk about movies, sometimes it's overkill for me. I don't really care or have an interest in the minutia that they wax eloquent about. It seems to me that I thought about this before your talk as to what the audience of a film festival would be. And one of them I came up with was exactly what you're talking about. I said, are there people that are from venture capital firms that are out there strictly to make a buck? And if they are, when all is said and done, does their interest in profit and the film critics' minutia interest, do they really coincide? And it turns out that the ones that are really have the angles and the lighting and the this and that end up matching with the ones that the venture capitalists want.
You have to look at kind of their cross purposes. I mean, certainly, I think critics and filmmakers and buyers have a background in film. So of course they're going to be more interested in the minutiae. They're going to care about that. But the average average film goer is not going to look at that minutiae. They're just going to look at whether it's a good story, it's a story that they're interested in, and is it visually appealing? Do they have actors that they enjoy watching? So sometimes it can get a bit can look at cross purposes, but I found that a lot of what the critics are talking about, the minutia, doesn't necessarily affect how people look at the film. The average film goer looks at the, but it does play a part in the, they're looking at sort of the overall interest in them. The critics are just going into the technical parts of it, or looking at a particular part of it. The average filmmaker is the average film goer is looking at the big picture. They're not really caring about that. But I think it's a good kind of guide, as if you can avoid sort of the technical part of it and just kind of look at, is the film critic saying that it's a good story?
Well,
Is it visually appealing? Parts like that.
Presentation.
Yeah, I was curious if they end up matching.
Where are you going?
If they end up matching, sometimes I think they do more times than not, because the film goer is seeing a well put together piece, and they're enjoying that. So they may agree with the critic that it's a good story, it's good acting, things like that, but they're just not worried about the
Linda
part of it.
Lynn,
Yeah.
get a thing of orange juice too, which is if they have.
Two things to me.
Well, thank you very much for letting me
All right.
talk to you and to keep you for so long. I hope this has been helpful, and I hope you look at films in a slightly different way, but just keep on enjoying them, and keep the industry alive. It's a great way to really just forget about your cares and just enjoy. Don't worry about the minutia, just enjoy the film.
Hey, Noel.
Thank you,
Noel.
Noel, it's off the press. Off the press,
Hi, Arthur.
as they say in my line of work, hurrah.
Thank you.
Hurrah. Great presentation. Fantastic.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Noel. Really enjoyed it.
Okay, folks, join us next Monday for the Monday meeting, which used to be called Forum, of course. And then on Wednesday, we've got 3 Not So Ordinary Joes. On Thursday, we've got the Eli Cathedral. And on Friday, Understanding the Myths of Estate Planning, which we all need to know about. So we'll see you all next week.
Thanks, Noel. Bye.
Bye.